Hey everybody, what's up and welcome. Just as a real quick heads up, you'll see that this particular episode begins with a presentation. And I thought I would just do a real quick intro and explanation. Our guest today is Wendy Gilch from Selling Later, and I found out about her actually on LinkedIn through this video that she recorded for customer comments, talking about real estate industry. And I found it a fascinating presentation. There's probably a lot that you don't agree with that. There's probably a lot that you might agree with. But I just thought it was such a wonderful presentation. And rather than trying to have her like give it or talk about that without showing it to you, I just thought I would embed it. And Wendy was kind enough to send me the video, so I did that. So this video is actually going to start with her presentation. And then we go into where we interview and speak to her and have conversations about the presentation, about sort of what her experiences and what she thinks is going to happen. Also, just a real quick, sorry for the intro when I mentioned the pretty face. On my screen, when I recorded it, it was my wife, Sunny, but that's not what happened on video. So you'll just kind of be like, that's okay. This is a pretty face too, right? Right? All right. Thanks, everybody.
Of Selling Later, which lets future home sellers and buyers connect up to a year in advance without selling their information to real estate companies. And I should just be clear up front, I'm not an agent. I'm not a company that's backed by real estate agencies. I'm not anyone in the industry. I'm a frustrated consumer that had a problem and decided to do something about it. And so just to kind of go over quickly a little bit about real estate and why this matters, you look at this segment and I wanted to pull just a more normal year. So I'm just pulling like 2019 numbers where 5.34 million homes were sold. And where intent casting really matters is more than half of them are move up and move down buyers. So they have a townhouse and they want to buy a family home, or they have this giant home and they want to downsize. And so the timing of how you buy and sell, it's actually how I ended up creating Selling Later, because I was in that exact same scenario. But this can also apply to renters too. When their lease is up, they know they want to make a move on this month. But the problem is timing. And this is what I studied the most before I launched Selling Later. And it's basically this. So home sellers know 5 to 10 months they want to sell in advance, and buyers can spend a year searching. But when you list your home until you close, right now, it's 33 days. And so you could spend 9 months thinking about making this move and doing some things to your home, but you have 33 days to list it, find a buyer, find your other home and close, or find an apartment and move. And so I look at that 9 months of just wasted time where you already know, but no one else knows you're thinking about it. And same for buyers, they're searching, but then you happen to look into that fear of missing out. And so what if another home that's better comes along? What if it doesn't? Is this the best I'm going to get? And then when you look at the current, let's look at the current housing market, which is pretty messy. Some homes list and go under an agreement in an hour. Some it's 3 days. And so there's hardly any inventory, but buyers are coming out because there's low interest rates. And then you have a ton of sellers sitting here thinking, I'd like to sell, but where am I going to go? And also, I'm going to make a ton of money if I sell my home right now, most likely, but I'm also going to be paying a ton of money to buy one. And so everyone's kind of in the dark. They're on the outside of the bubble, or they're in that 30-day window. And what's worse is for first-time home buyers right now, they're competing against all cash offers, which when you're a first-time home buyer, that's not necessarily an option for you. But the bigger problem, and this is what I didn't know, at least I had an idea. I didn't know how bad it was, but it's gatekeeping. And so you look at this scenario, you have home sellers on one side and home buyers on the other. But then you have this wall built up because home sellers and home buyers shouldn't connect. And certainly to a degree, like a professional needs to be involved, but you're trained as a consumer to know that you should never speak to the buyers. But but it's not necessarily for the reasons you think. It's because there's 4 or 5 groups in the middle that want to be a part of this transaction. So first you look at selling services. If you start connecting directly, there's less chance for them to be involved in the transaction. And when you look at the big picture, there are 2 million real estate agents to sell 5 million homes. And of those 2 million, 1.4 million of them are realtors. And then in the mix of that, you have iBuyers, you have maybe the discount agents, and you have flat fee MLS. And so all these people are competing for your attention, and they don't want you to use someone else. And so they hold that information to themselves. And I feel bad for agents because it's emphasized so much. You can be an agent, you can make so much money, but there's 2 million of them. And so as an agent, you don't want someone taking your clients, so you're not sharing that information. And so once the seller or buyer gets into the selling service category, that's not going to be accessible to the public. And there actually are 2 companies that have ads out right now. One, a major brokerage here in Pittsburgh, where I am, and the other one is in Florida, that have an ad that tells you you can go on and look through all our buyer profiles. And they even show on the ad all these buyer profiles, but you as a consumer can't contact them directly. It's baiting you. And they all have these database lists, but it's kind of like dangling the carrot in front of the seller, like, look who we have, come on out. But you're never going to talk to the seller directly or the buyer directly because they have to be in the middle. So then you look at the aggregators. So we're looking at the companies that pulled MLS data. And great, that's helpful. I think it's great. Consumers have more access to see more details on homes and when they're selling. But the bulk of these are marketing platforms because they want to get your info and sell it off to a lender, sell it off to a real estate agent. And that's how they make the bulk of their money. And then this is my favorite, are referral platforms. These are the ones that I didn't know about until I went to the real estate agent conference. And these are the people that claim to help you find the best agent, help you find the best way to sell your home. But really all they do is find an agent that's willing to give this referral platform 30% of the commission they earned because they sold the name. And so you're not necessarily getting a great agent. And so these referral companies are like the middlemen of the middlemen who also don't want you to interact because they want to get you to someone that's willing to pay for your info. And there's a ton of them. And there's now some that you look at Rocket Homes, that's synced up with the Rocket Mortgage, which is part of Quicken. And so that takes me into this last one, which is funnel services. The time a company gets you in their funnel, and I know this is just business, but they don't want you to go elsewhere, and there's no options really. It's all, look what I have for you. And while you're here, look at this service. And hey, I know a great lender. But as a consumer, you don't know that there are kickbacks for doing that. You know, I didn't know that until a home warranty company said, hey, we'll give you $60 every time you sell a home warranty to Selling Later members. And of course I said no, and I screenshotted our conversation just for liability purposes when I talk about this. But this is what happens. And so once you get in that funnel, it's almost like, while you're here, we'll make it easy for you. But really, it's just, what else can I sell you? What else can I sell you? And then the last little piece are these cameras. You know, these are the middlemen of the middlemen of the middlemen. There are data companies that are just watching. They know the average time people in your area stay in your home. And if that time's coming up, are you more likely to sell your home? Look at your purchases. Have you been buying paint? Have you been buying home improvement? Have you taken out like a home equity loan to maybe do some things to your home? And so as a home seller and a home buyer, everybody's watching you, but nobody wants you to talk.
Wendy, sorry, before you move on,
sure.
Can I ask you to clarify MLS for some of our international
absolutely,
attendees?
Absolutely. So this is kind of the system in which all agents put in the home information. And so agents have access to all the information. So down to how much commission is going to be paid. And so in the US, it's between 5 and 6%. And on the MLS, it'll say the buyer agent gets 2.5 and the seller agent gets 2.5. But this is basically just the whole book on the home. And these aggregator sites, they don't pull everything, but they pull enough for you to be able to go through and look at this. Does that make sense? It's kind of like the one place where you can find all the homes that are for sale. Does that make sense?
Thanks, Wendy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here's the problem. Now consumers have less control, which means there's less chance for savings. And so we talk about commissions. As I said before, like in the US, it's between 5 or 6, but you should know that that has gone down less than 1% since 1992. And then consumer access to the MLS. And, previously it was you go to an agent and they have a CD and you print out the pages and you look through the books and you look at homes you like. But now you don't have to do that. And you go online, and a lot of buyers now find the homes themselves for the most part. But that's been since the early 2000s. And so you think about since 1992, like, why has that gone down less than 1%? You think about technology and phones and accessibility. And then you look at referral platforms. And so you look at them and you think, okay, more and more companies in the startup world are doing this, where they go to agents because there are so many of them. And because they're all looking for clients, hey, I'll give you this lead, but if it closes, you owe me 30%. And all of these companies prop themselves up as a helpful tool to help you find the best agent. But it's not true, because it's based on who's going to pay them 30% of their earned commission. And the problem with that is, I talked to someone at realtor.com who used to work there and did the analytics, and he said, agent spending by year 3 dropped dramatically. And that's because a lot of agents, once they get established, are doing personal referrals. And so you also have to look at it and say, who am I actually being referred to? But this is $1 billion business, and it's made by gatekeeping. And more companies are doing this rather than the simple pay to play, $20 per lead, hope it works out for you. But this leaves consumers with no room to negotiate. Because if, say I go on Dave Ramsey's preferred agent program, I'm just using him as an example, and I get an agent referred by him. Well, that agent, say, will pay like Dave Ramsey $2,000. And so that's coming out of that your specific agent's earning. But you don't know that. And so that's already agreed upon when they agree to take your information. And so then you go to the agent and you say, hey, I want to talk to you about a buyer's rebate, which is legal in 40 states. And it's just the agent willing to give some of the commission back to the consumer in closing costs. But how can the agent do that if they already gave up 30%? But you as a consumer don't know this is happening. And then you look at disruptive services. Listen, proptech world is what they call it. So all these companies that are innovative and starting new things, that's great. But a lot of these new selling services are coming at a high cost for convenience, and they're still not directly connecting anybody. It's just another way to quickly sell your home for X%. And the biggest problem with this is they all follow similar patterns. They all start with this idea of, I'm going to help the consumer, and some truly do, but a lot of them start taking investment money. And with that goes some of your equity and some of your control. And the more money you take, the more you give up on what you should be doing. And you have that pressure to have some results. And so when you look at the most profitable piece in real estate, it's selling consumer information. And a lot of them end up having to go that route because they are responsible to make money for someone else. And the biggest piece of this is, we go back to that 2 million real estate agents, and 1.4 million of them are realtors. Well, that's governed by the National Association of Realtors. And one of the best real estate agents that I know of in Minnesota specifically told me that when an innovative company starts to become successful that can affect anything in that segment, they will start suing and causing issues to either push them out of business or have somebody buy them. And that's kind of how, like, the National Association of Realtors got the cartel nickname. And they are the second biggest lobbying group in the US, only below the US Chamber of Commerce. And so you have to look at these scenarios and wonder, like, this is why it's hard for consumers. It's not that you have selling options. It's not the iBuyer's fault, because really you have options and that's great, but it's all controlled and there's still no direct connections. And so I just got mad enough about all this and made Selling Later, which lets consumers connect and promote their home a year in advance without selling any of their information to real estate companies. And I made it before I met Bill Wendell and all these great people who already have been talking about intent casting for years. I didn't even know that was a term until I met with them. And so it's been really neat to listen to see what I've already plugged into play versus where this is headed. It's pretty simple. It's just the current day intent casting solution.
Hey everybody, welcome to an episode of the Notorious POD. If you are seeing a much prettier face on the recording, I think that is a bonus for everybody. This is obviously my wife, Sunny, who is also a partner in the firm, at least until somebody comes along and scouts her away from me, like another big, rather large tech company has done in the past. But as long as we have her, I thought we'd take advantage of it. And look, you've seen the video. I mean, the plan was to sort of embed a video of a presentation that Wendy, who is with us today, did for, I believe it's called Consumer Connect. Is that right, Wendy?
Customer Commons out of Boston.
Yeah. And I just thought it was a very interesting presentation, just highlighted at least some of the issues that we're confronting as an industry. So we wanted to invite her on to have a conversation. So welcome, Wendy. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad you can hear me.
Yeah, I know. We tried this earlier. We had some internet related issues and we're like, hey, we should be thankful technology allows us to do this in the first place.
Right.
So before we dive into kind of the presentation, I know you went into a little bit about, in the presentation, why you started selling later. Tell us a little bit more. How did this come about? Why'd you do it? Because, I get calls from startup founders all the time, and I'm like, please find some other industry because you'll make a lot more money.
Yeah.
So tell us the story.
Okay, so I originally based it off of not being able to time buying and selling, and I originally just created it as a place for sellers to let others know when they're going to be selling, rather than it being a big surprise when they hit the market. Because sellers know 5 to 10 months in advance they're going to make a move, but you just don't do anything while you're waiting. And so originally it was just a place to let people know as a public forum. And then I attended a real estate agent conference, and I'm not a real estate agent. I have no background in that. So I sat at the conference and I felt like a fish out of water. And I was even in the green room back with a bunch of higher ups in the whole industry. And I remember texting my husband just saying, like, I don't think I fit in here. We're not talking about the same stuff. Like, this is going to be really interesting when I go on stage. And so I went on stage and I talked about how I just think everyone should know when homes are selling, and I want to donate to nonprofits. And when I sat back down in my seat, Bill Wendell had sent me a LinkedIn message, and we just started connecting about consumer advocacy. Like, I didn't know about referral platforms. I'm just a consumer. So that was a big shock to me. And after my presentation, people came up to me asking about, like, do you do referral fees? I said, I don't know what that is. I had no idea. And so, from Bill Wendell to Lindy Chapman, I just started to learn about all the things as a consumer you don't know about, like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz pulling behind the curtain. Yeah. And it took me a good year to understand how it all works when you don't know about it as a consumer, and who makes money off of you, whether they should or shouldn't, when you don't know about it, and how does that impact you? And it ended up just pivoting to this consumer advocacy platform of connections and education and resources. And it's just kind of goes from there. But you're right. This industry is brutal. It's so brutal, but it's almost like, is there something wrong with me that I really enjoy doing this? Like, is there a problem with me that I like thoroughly look forward?
You might want to talk to a therapist about it, but that's okay. We don't have to unpack all of that here. But and I really appreciated watching your presentation, and then I dove into your website, the consumer advocacy piece, because yes, you are a consumer, you're a real estate consumer, and you had this need that wasn't being fulfilled currently in the market, but you did something about it. And a lot of people say, oh yeah, well, it's terrible, but I don't have to do it again for another, 7 to 10 years. I'm not really going to worry about it, but you actually did something. And so I love the fact that you have done so much due diligence and so much research, and just connecting with a bunch of other consumer advocates in and around the space, because you saw something was broken and you're like, how can we fix it together? And how can we educate consumers along the way? So I love that story. And I love the presentation and what you are bringing to consumers in terms of education and advocacy. So I was very excited when Rob said that we had a chance to talk to you today.
Yeah, I'm thrilled. Thank you.
So before we dive into kind of what you pointed out at the presentation, I'm just curious, like, do you have a background in like negotiating the Israeli-Palestinian, issue or other really difficult political, because that's the industry you've entered into, right?
Right. You know, I just bought a book by Alan something, and it's about the governmental issues behind real estate. So that's like the next piece. Blockchain and government policy is like my next educational phase at some point. But like one thing, like those are two big ones. That's going to take me a while.
All right.
Yeah, so we'll get there. But yeah, my background, I managed 3 hospitality brands. So marketing is my background. But I'm a little stubborn and I'm a little like righteous, do the right thing. And so somehow that blends together and here we are.
Here we are.
I don't know. And I somehow I end up networking. I don't know how I meet all these people. Like I have no idea how a random person in Pittsburgh has been able to network their way to different people, but there's power in number, right? And for consumer advocacy, and we're better off working together than chipping away individually.
Right. All right. So let's talk about the presentation, because that brings us right to that, right? I mean, because on LinkedIn, which is where I saw it, and I'm so glad that I did. I mean, you really laid it out with what do you think is the real problem within the real estate industry? And you talked about DOJ pulling out of the NAR settlement, and that whole presentation then lays out, in your view, what the issue is, right? So if you could, like, what is there like a 30-second version? Like, what is the real problem with the real estate industry?
Gatekeeping. It's total gatekeeping. There's so much money to be made from the minute you think about selling, because data companies watch that, sell you off to lead generation, sell you off to an agent, sell you off to a selling service. And even when you're in your selling service, there's the funnel system, and then they're selling you more stuff. And there's control to be lost when sellers and buyers know about each other first. So if connections came first and selling services came second, what does that look like? Like when consumers have more power and control, how does that change the dynamic?
Okay. And how does it change the dynamic?
There's a lot of control, and there's a lot more education. I think should be a lot in savings. There's that whole system of referral platforms it's no longer pay per lead, it's pay when you close, and it's 30% of the commission. And so you have to wonder if that's the rate that everybody's going, like how expensive is it going to be for an agent to get a client, and then you're not able to negotiate as a consumer because they're already paying 30%. So I think there's a lot to talk about in savings. I think there's a lot to talk about, from a brokerage standpoint. We talk about the pocket listing rule, right? That was supposed to help keep things from being hidden. But I mean, they can still share stuff within their brokerage, right? Like within their office. And so if you have a giant brokerage, right? So it like almost benefits you. Like I can't tell anyone else, but I can tell these 50 people in my office, and at this rate, there's probably a buyer in there. So
if only someone had written,
or 15 buyers, and then you can get those buyers to compete.
I was just laughing because I'm like, if only someone had written a post talking about clear cooperation of policy and the the broker exclusive rule.
Right.
Anyway, sorry.
Rob, are you pointing to yourself on that?
You might have been there. I do read your stuff. I thoroughly enjoyed I watched your interview with the head of the board of the Rezo.
Rezo?
Rezo, yeah.
Did you do? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I watched that. That was entertaining.
Yeah.
But right. That's even interesting because you look at that whole board, and it's MLS, it's data companies, and it's brokerages, right? So I don't know. It's just fascinating to see who's in charge and the lack of control and knowledge and the consumer aspect.
Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned was the referral fees, and when agents are paying those referral fees, it kind of takes away some of the consumer's negotiating power. Do you think, I mean, one of the things that kind of came through in your presentation was that a lot of consumers don't seem to know that they can negotiate. And so I'd love to chat with you a little bit about that, because as a broker, I, really tried to advocate to my agents to have those conversations with their clients, sit down with them before they even go look at houses, to talk about how they get paid, what they get paid, how they get paid, how that is, how that is worked out, when it is worked out. But the gatekeeping part that you were mentioning, and then all of the different players that are coming in and getting pieces of those fees that are based on the commissions, that was really interesting. And I don't know how many consumers actually know all of that. And so I really applaud you for putting that in the forefront of consumers' minds, so they know, oh, I can ask for a rebate. I can I can negotiate this. How does that even work? So I really applaud you for that, and would love to kind of have you walk us through and walk the audience through some of those different points that you made in that presentation.
Right, absolutely. So, there's this bulk of websites that find you the best agent. And I before I had launched Selling Later, there was one in particular that I would email and say, hey, I really like what you're doing and helping people navigate how to sell and finding a good agent. But they were a giant dent in the referral platforms. And so now I'm like embarrassed I even sent that. I will never admit that again. But, I think when you look at that 30% and you see some agents like offended that someone wants to negotiate, but no one seems to be offended at like the platforms that continually roll out that take that 30%. Like there's no conversation of how to make that stop or how to make that more transparent. And then when you look at clients, it's what 10% have no idea how their agent got paid, no idea.
Really?
And then 20%, 20% didn't know or didn't feel comfortable asking that they could negotiate. And it's interesting, you look at, there's 5% here, 6% there. And I think it's just giving them the verbiage to do it and giving them the reasons why, like, hey, I contacted you directly. I didn't go through an ad service. I didn't go through anywhere. Like, you're not paying for me. I think I should be able to talk to you about lowering the commission a little bit, or, I'm buying and selling with you. And some agents will negotiate that, but some won't say a word. Or, hey, I'm buying a new house. I want you to represent me, but you've never had to show me a house. I think it's fair to talk about a buyer's rebate if legal in the state, and just finding a way to give them the confidence to do it, because they're asking the questions. I surf Reddit all the time, and that real estate forum is the best eye opener into what the consumer doesn't understand and what they're asking. And it's fascinating to watch. And that's one of the biggest ones is why am I paying so much? So
why am I paying so much if I've already found the house? So that piece, that discovery piece, is already taken care of now. And in some cases, consumers can tour before they even connect with an agent. They can tour homes that are maybe owned by an institution. They can go tour. So they've identified the home, they've actually seen it, and they want to just write an offer. So that first piece is already taken care of, but they don't know that they can negotiate because some of the work is already done.
Right.
Because as someone who used to sell, I can tell you that there were times that I would spend days and days showing people homes. Maybe they would never write an offer. And there are agents out there who will say, well, it balances out. There are ones that I spend a lot of time and they never end up buying. And then there are some that are really easy. But does that person that's really easy, why is it incumbent upon them to pay you for your time of ones that didn't end up transacting?
Right.
I'm sure there's a different way of doing it. And Rob might have some thoughts on this as well, because I know he likes to poke holes in my arguments sometimes. Absolutely. But it's just a question about consumers and what it is they need. And I don't know, maybe you've seen on Reddit if consumers would be really happy to do some kind of a la carte service, or maybe that's something else you can work on your platform of, if agents were to offer a la carte services, would that be of interest? Would consumers even know what services they needed?
Right. Absolutely.
No, I guess what immediately occurs to me, again, from the presentation and from what you're just saying right now, Wendy, is like, You're not going to win a lot of popularity contests within industry gatherings, I'd imagine, right?
Yeah, yes and no. Like I would never tell someone if they should or shouldn't use an agent, shouldn't use an iBuyer. You know, I think that's the focus, right? iBuyers are ruining this, and but really, I mean, you have options on how to sell, and maybe that's great. You know, it's it used to be one way, and now you have three. Pick what works best for you. So I'm not
Sure.
anti anybody, but I am pro transparency in
Sure.
conversations, right?
Sure. So I'm going to anticipate some of the questions and objections, right? That I
Right.
imagine my audience, because let's face it, my audience is mostly industry people. I happen to think they're more enlightened than most, and I happen to think they're going to be more open to this notion than most. But let's try and anticipate some of the first thing that comes to mind, obviously, is, that you're undermining the expert advice and support that consumers need, right? And for example, essentially what you're proposing is something like a assisted FSBO type platform, and realtor usage is at an all-time high, right? And even among younger millennial Gen Z type consumers, they realize, I don't do this very often. I do this once every 7 years, and I really need an expert to help me. So the fact that they're not asking, the fact that they're not contesting commissions or trying to explore these options because they don't want to. This is just normal, natural market for why are you getting in the midst of that?
Right.
What
So,
do you say?
surprisingly, a couple people on the platform still wanted to list, but they wanted to just collect names and say, hey, if this person's the buyer, I found them, and put their name in the agreement. I'm just going to pay less if John Doe is the buyer, or Jane Doe. I'll go with Jane Doe.
Sure.
But I think the problem is with 2 million real estate agents, there are some awesome ones, and I'm happy to have found them. And we just rolled out this community where people can share and ask questions, and I include them because I want their input. And if you don't know what you're doing, you should use an agent. There's that misconception of like, it can't be that hard, I'll figure it out. But like legally, you could probably get in a lot of trouble for that. So, I'm certainly not opposed to it, but I think it's like that, as Bill Wendell calls, like, do some yourself. Like it's just to test the waters and experiment. And I want to give them the freedom to go whichever route they want. And I'll never tell them what they should or shouldn't do. I just want to educate them to understand where their money goes and what services and frankly, how to find a good agent, because that best agent title's bought and paid for. So, I have gotten that a million times before in the pushback, but there are really good agents out there that understand, there's issues and want transparency and offer rebates and are happy to do so. So, I'm not for everybody, but I think it's okay to have those conversations, and you don't have to participate. It's fine,
Okay. And then the other one that I think they would most likely push back on is ultimately what you're doing is going to destroy the structure, right, of the industry. In other words, this like well-informed consumer base that goes out and does all this negotiation and all of that, it's essentially what commercial real estate looks like. And commercial real estate is a major pain in the ass. What differentiates residential from commercial is the multiple listing service that is built around this notion of cooperation and compensation, because everyone is sure to getting paid and so on and so forth. And frankly, everything you mentioned, everything's negotiable, right? So they could do all of that within the existing structure. What you're up to, Wendy, is going to destroy this most transparent, most wide open system that we have. What's your take on that?
I'm not hiding anything. Everything that is posted on Selling Later is publicly accessible to everybody. And that's not always the case with the MLS, right? Like consumers only have access to so much. And that just started in the early 2000s. And so I don't look at it as changing everything, but I do think it's the consumers that are spending the money. They're paying for 30 years for something, and it's just really kind of not in their control of how things go. And when you talk about commissions, like that's going to be an interesting conversation with the DOJ in regards to who's getting paid, when, how. So, I don't think it's not so much disrupting. It's just letting everybody have a fair chance at knowing what's coming on the market and knowing how to make good choices based on what's for you. It's not, I'm not trying to blow everything up. I mean, if it happens, I'm sorry, but that's not my mission. It's just to transparency, education, and time. That's all I want out of the platform.
Okay, awesome.
Well, and you mentioned in terms of, we were talking about gatekeepers, and you mentioned the referral companies were one, but I know that in your presentation you did name several other different gatekeepers and different parties that buyers and sellers have to identify and select in a really short period of time. Can we talk a little bit about that as well? And then I want to ask you, before I forget, after we talk about gatekeepers, I'm going to want to ask you about really what you think makes, and what the customers on your platform think make a great agent. Because I think those are they're different conversations, but I think that they're really important ones to have.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So the players in the game, you look at the referral systems, if they can't sell you to an agent, then they don't make money. But you look at agents alone, and there's two companies out there, one specifically that's promoting that you can access their database and see all the buyers they have. But really, that's just so they get both sides of the deal, right? Like, they're not going to let you just contact someone directly. And there's 2 million agents to sell 5 million homes. So you can't blame an agent for not letting people know, about their clients, because it's cutthroat. Someone's going to go in and take them. So I don't fault them for that. I mean, you have to make money. If you don't sell a home, you don't get paid, which is an interesting process when you think about, like, the biggest purchase of your life is a 100% sales commission person handling it. So it's interesting. And that's, I think, where the trust comes in. But you look at inspectors, appraisals, you don't think to, like, find those people ahead of time. So then you're in a panic. You need to get your home inspected. I mean, right now, some people don't care to do that, which is another whole story. But, you have like 5 days to find a home inspector and get them out there. And most consumers never thought to, like, look for one. And so they just ask their agent. And sometimes that works out awesome. And sometimes it's like their friend. And it's the same thing, like lenders, sometimes they just send you to a lender. And I've seen conversations on Reddit about people that she asked, like, basically referral exchange between a lender and an agent, which I'm pretty sure is against a lot of violations. But, like, that stuff is out there. It might not be common. But so you look at that, you look at the data companies that sell leads, and it's just everybody benefits the more that they keep you apart and can put you down the different funnels. And I think that's why a lot of brokerages are having their own insurance company. They're having their own mortgage branch, because I don't think it's enough to just make commissions off of someone anymore. So they have to keep it going, and most of them are VC backed, and you need to have results. So, which is probably why I'll never be a candidate for VC. I've accepted and embraced that, because this is like a long journey. I've accepted it.
Well, and Rob and I too have done a ton of research over the years, and the reason why so many brokerages rely on ancillary services, title, escrow, mortgage, is because the brokerage business has a 3% profit margin across, like, that's the average across the country, is a 3% profit margin, which isn't a real healthy business. And as someone who has been a broker, it is really challenging work for a very small return. And so that's why there are so many that are realizing, if we want to make money, if we want to have a profitable business, if we do want to be a target for a VC or private equity for an investment, we do need to show more revenue and have, different revenue streams. So a lot of them are looking at that, and I totally get it. And I'm like you, I don't fault anyone. Everyone is trying to take care of their families. They're trying to run a business. But having some more transparency into the process, I don't think is a bad thing.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. At least,
but
I'm
like you, I'm not for everyone. So
yeah, right. I've accepted that. It takes thick skin to do this, I suppose. But I was in hospitality for years and dealt with the community for like 13 years. I'm weathered, and I worked with all men, so I'm fine. I'll be okay.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
I'll be okay.
So
the hospitality industry isn't something to play with, so I'll be okay. But go ahead. Sorry.
So, again, from your presentation, you talked sort of specifically about some of the regulatory action coming down the pike. Actually, before that, I'm going to go back to the second part of Sunny's questions, because I don't think
good agents.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's do that, and then I'll get into the whole regulation stuff of it. Yeah.
Okay. So here's what I didn't know. I assumed years of experience meant you're a great agent. That's not really true. I assumed that someone referring you to someone is because they were awesome, but that's not really true. Like I watch some of the mom Facebook groups, like that's the place where people go to ask for agent referrals. And the average in Pittsburgh, so we're not even talking a giant market, it's 152 different real estate agents thrown at this person. And it's overwhelmed. Like, how are they supposed to pick from that? So, I've learned, in my opinion, it's not a friend and it's not a family member, because you might have to have uncomfortable conversations and they're going to know your finances. So like, if that makes you uncomfortable, I would stay away from that. And if for some reason things don't work out, that's an awkward conversation too, right? But I love to tell people to look where they're selling, look where they're buying. Like, do they actually know about the community? Like, what kind of questions should you be asking them? And I had one of my favorite agents write a few down, just like, what's your guidance? What do you do when you sell a home? Like, tell me your marketing plan. And if it's just like, put it on the MLS, it's like, well, maybe right now that's not a huge deal, but are you going to do professional photography? Like, how are you connected in the community? And then it's also looking at, from a buyer's standpoint, like, do they know the neighborhood, especially if you're relocating? I didn't know this. Like, when you're relocating, you're told like who to pick from for agents. It's not like you can just go pick anybody. And so it's like, do they even live where you're looking to buy? Do they know the schools? So it's like those questions to ask. But my favorite, and he's not everywhere, Steve, I'm blanking on his last name. I'm really sorry, Steve. He runs Pure Reputation, and he let me have an account. I probably shouldn't say that out loud, but I can go in and see what other agents say about each other. And he has this algorithm set up that you can't really fake, based on like sales and your quantity of sales and your feedback from other agents on how you are to work with. So that's important. Like, if you have an agent that nobody likes, like, it might be a little harder for you, but you won't know that until like you realize that nobody wants to call them back, or nobody has positive things to say about them. So like, I love to creep on Steve's platform, and I tell people to go on there all the time. It's not everywhere, but it's in a majority of markets that you can at least see if other people like working with them.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're a seller and you've got 20 offers in front of you from different buyers and buyers agents, your agent is going to say, these one, if I'm giving away some secrets, I'm going to give away some secrets. But your agent is going to say, yeah, these are the terms. By the way, this agent is really hard to work with. This one has a tendency to flake out. This one's really great. And so they know if you have a good agent that's working on your side as well, they are going to tell you this person is great. It's going to be a lot easier. Yeah, maybe I don't know their buyer, but you at least have that rapport. And also, if you're a buyer's agent and you're submitting an offer, if you have good rapport with the listing agent, you can call them like, hey, sending you an offer, it's going to be great.
Right.
Really looking forward to working with you. But it's something too, as a broker, I used to ask my agents when they closed a transaction, I would ask them, my agent directly, like, how was this person to work with? Because I wanted to know as well. I was not doing transactions as a broker. I wasn't going to compete with my agents, but I wanted to know who the good agents in the market were. Like, is this person, like, do they communicate? Do they get their paperwork done on time?
Right.
Do they, uphold all of their commitments?
Right.
Are they advocating for their client? Like, is this a great person to work with? Because I just wanted to know that.
Right.
It was
And
good for me too.
And the one thing I did forget, which I do say, is to like go on their social media pages and see what they write about, because there are some like intense people, and passion and ideas and thoughts are great. But like, if you're spewing like hate and just going across the border, like it, that might make you uncomfortable. So like, and I know you don't want to mess personal with business, but I think it's fair to say, especially if you live a lifestyle that maybe they don't agree with, I think it's fair for you to know that, because it's, if they're making a ton of money off of you, but behind your back, they're totally ranting about everything, like, do you want to work with that person? Are they going to treat you fairly,
So I guess I'm now going to ask both of you, right?
Okay.
Because I'm still unclear as to what the definition of a good agent is. In other words, like, if it's a good attorney, right? It's like, okay, how do you measure that? How many cases do you win? Like, what's your win rate? If you're a doctor, what's your survival rate from whatever difficult surgery. With agents, like how are both of you defining good agents? What I heard is, are you part of the community? Do you know the neighborhood? Like, what is it that a good agent does? In your opinion, how do you define agent quality?
Transparency. Are they telling you how they're going to make money, how they're going to do the process, how things work? Do they educate you? I think that I'd love to know too, Sunny, if you can tell me, why is there a buyer admin fee? I know I don't want to get off track, but like if we could ever circle back to that, I would love to know if someone could explain the point of the buyer admin fee would be great.
I didn't see those. I was in Washington State and I didn't see the buyer admin fees. So maybe we'll chat about that offline now.
Yeah, it's interesting and it ranges, but I think in this market to be part-time, I don't know if I could work with a part-time agent with how quickly things move. I think that's something to consider, but communication's giant too. And that maybe goes with personality. Like if you hate talking on the phone and you are paired with an agent that loves to just call you, like that might not work out for you, right? Like if you're into texting, like, it's having those conversations and knowing that that person is on the same page with you, I think. And it's probably partially gut too, like do you feel comfortable with this person? And there's no way to do that on the internet. Like reviews, I don't know which ones you can trust. I have no idea if you can make those up. I have no idea. So I don't know how much you trust those, but I don't know if you have anything else. I don't know if there's like a quantitative number, but it's kind of.
Yeah, Sunny, what do you think? How do you define good agent?
I mean, part of what Wendy said for me was huge, is setting expectations. And I think people need to set expectations up front and have a conversation up front. Again, like, does your agent do a buyer's intake interview? Do they actually sit down with you, explain the process, explain how they work with you, ask you how you want to be communicated with, but really setting that expectation and setting that tone and then following through with it. Like if you want to text, or, hey, by the way, when I'm at work, I need you to text me, but in the evening, if you could call me, that would be great. Like setting those expectations ahead of time and having open, transparent conversations, talking about how as an agent you get paid, talking about the expertise. I think knowing your market makes a good agent. Like if you don't know all of the inventory in your market, if you're working a neighborhood and you don't know everything about the homes that have sold, what's available, which lots might be better than others based on your experience, like that kind of super local expertise, I think is one of those things that it's one of those intangibles that makes a huge difference. Like we bought a cabin a few months ago in Utah, and we had an agent who had been working that market, or his family had actually been working that market for over 30 years. He knew everything. Before I would show him, I'm like, hey, I like this one. He goes, oh, you're going to hate that one. The lot it's like steep. The access is terrible. He's like, we'll drive by it, but I don't think you're going to like it. And so he knew these things and was able to help us save time by not going through a bunch of properties that weren't going to work for us. We told him like, hey, we want to see these ones. He said, great. But he also threw in some other ones based on what we were looking for that we might not have considered, but would possibly work for us. So he really listened to what we needed and then maximized our time. Like he didn't want to waste our time. He wanted us to find what we wanted, but also just get to know the area, but help us like know what we didn't know. And I think that makes a great agent too, there's so much information out there. Right. And there's so much, for lack of a better term, real estate porn. You can just scroll through and look at all of this stuff, but actually having someone who will take that information and synthesize it for you and like distill it down into what I'm listening to what you say is important. What you're showing me does not match what you're telling me. Right. And having someone who can walk you through that and really help you hone in as an agent or as a consumer, help you hone in on those things that are most important, I think makes a great agent.
Right. And it's crazy to think that I was reading, most consumers don't know or don't think to like interview more than one. Like they get a name and they just start there. And I keep making these TikToks. I will never understand TikTok. I'll never get it, but we're getting there. I'm like, am I too old for this? I'm 39. Like, do I fit in here? But, like, normalize interviewing people and normalize interviewing a couple people, because maybe they're great, but the personality is something you can't stand, or, like, how are you going to work with them and test them out, because you don't want to sign something and then you're stuck with them, or you're stuck with the brokerage, and then they'll maybe find you someone else. But, it's like normalizing doing the due diligence instead of relying on just one person giving you a name.
But see, I feel like that's one of the issues, right? And I've been struggling with this ever since I got into the industry. So back in 2009. And I think one of my earliest posts that I've ever written was like agent quality. How do you know an agent is good? How do you define this? And more over the years, what I've sort of come to is this point that a real estate agent is this bizarre mix of a psychologist and a project manager. And fact is, we don't have enough of the quantitative sort of objective metrics for success, right? So let me give you a counterexample. Some of the best litigators I know are straight up assholes. Like, you don't want to spend any time with these people and they'll rub you the wrong way. They are absolute pricks. However, they get you results. Right. Same thing with doctors. Like, some of this, like the best doctors I know like they're just not pleasant to be around. They're very imperious. They're like, I know better than you.
They lack bedside manner.
They lack bedside manners. They have God complexes. But you know what, man, if you need a surgery, like that's the guy you want to go to, right?
Right.
And if real estate were that way, then we would just look at objective metrics, like what's your sale rate, what's your success rate, how much money are you saving, whatever the metrics are. But so much of like everything that you guys are talking about is how does that person make you feel? The psychology of it. Is that person going to communicate with me more? And like, isn't that like, is there a way of divorcing that or no? Because I feel like consumers want that.
Some of the success metrics you're talking about there are very lead driven. And I don't know any consumer that really says, yes, please treat me like a lead, treat me like a number. I don't know any buyers or sellers that are like, please treat me like a piece of meat. Like, I want you to get through this as quickly as possible. I mean, yeah, you want to get your home sold as quickly as possible. Like maybe that's your priority of getting it sold really fast. Maybe it's getting the most amount of money. Maybe it's something else that is your priority. But those success metrics that you're talking about, Rob, to me feel like, let's go back to treating consumers like leads. And I'm going, I don't really.
That's not what I mean. I literally mean kind of like trying to do a parallel to like an attorney or an accountant, right? Like for 6 or 7 years when I lived in New York City, I used this accountant that I would never want to hang out with. Like he smelled bad. He was terrible. It was just awful. But you know what? That guy got me more in tax refunds than anyone I've ever dealt with up till that point or since. So there's like this objective success metric for someone like that I say, you know what? I'll put up with your bullshit. I'll put up with your nonsense because you're getting me the results that I want. We don't really have that in real estate. You know what I mean? That's kind of what I'm getting at.
It's such a big commitment though. So if it's
correct,
if it's like you're paying for it for 30 years, if someone's hurting me through like cattle, I'm going to question if I trust them. Like, do they have my best interest? So it's like, I think some people need pushed, and some people, if you push them, that's it. Like, forget it. I'm not working with you. So it's like almost personality driven, I guess. What category do you fall into of what you need? And I don't know how to quantify that, but I can say, I don't think there needs to be 2 million. I think there's a lot, and it would probably be easier if that was maybe whittled down a little bit. I don't even know how you qualify that. I don't.
Right. So to bring this back to kind of your points around transparency, right? One of the things I've been complaining about really since the beginning of getting into the industry and being a pain in the ass to the industry is the lack of transparency around that, right? In other words, like you just look at things like when HAR tried to do agent ratings, when was it House? That wasn't House Canary, Homelight, Drewer's Google-backed company, wanted to publish these objective metrics on agent performance. The industry went absolutely apeshit and said, hell no, we're not doing that. So it's So with your platform, do you guys have plans to do stuff like agent performance transparency?
I have thought about that. I have thought about, as the community grows, it like, if you want to write about the agent you use, like, I want to verify that you actually use them first. I think that's important. But I do think it's fair to critique your agent, good or bad, and maybe even, I mean, I guess not have a conversation with them, but I think you have to. Like, I'm using Peer Reputation right now, but like, eventually I think consumers need to like be able to have more conversations and read the commentary. But is that personality driven sometimes, like a personality conflict, so which is hard.
Right. Because that's one of my
no.
issues with consumer reviews is that it's like, oh, my agent was so great and so friendly and this and that and the thing. And I'm like, yeah, but objectively speaking, you look at the numbers, like you paid $10,000 more than you should have. Like you might have felt great about the experience, but the objective result sucks for you. Like, how do we?
Right. You lost money.
Well, it's hard to uncouple it because it's a highly emotional transaction, and usually those reviews are written after they've had a successful, like, they bought their house, they're super excited, they haven't started packing and moving yet, so that like hateful piece of it hasn't come in yet, so they're kind of riding this high, this emotional high, and that's when they're writing their review.
And then there's this problem.
It's great because of X, Y, and Z.
The other problem is, and I brought this up with some of the folks over at Zillow with CSAT and some of the changes that they're making there, right? Because Zillow's trying to do something around agent quality and so on and so forth, best of Zillow and all these things. One of the issues that you have is some agents are unbelievably great at taking care of the customer, taking care of the buyer, the seller, but they suck at lead gen. So they don't do the transaction volume, right? And yet, to your point, like, they know the neighborhood, they know the builders, they know the construction method, they know it all, but they have 6 transactions in a year because they're terrible salespeople, right? In terms of selling their own services. How do we? Is there a way to bridge that, whether it's through technology or through something, something like what you might be able to? I don't even know if that's a platform issue. I don't know. So I'm just kind of asking that question to both you guys.
Yeah, I don't. It's not like you can say like, well, I only sold 6 this year because I did X, Y, and Z. I don't know how you verify that, or the people that I have met that I really think are honest and transparent, and this is like Atlanta, Dallas, and Pittsburgh. They do more than that, but they're not pushy. So they might at times maybe fall there on a bad year, but they're amazing. So you're right. I don't know how you get past that, because if you're looking at that number, you'd be like, skip. They're obviously not busy,
Right. And yet it turns out they're really awesome. It's just for whatever reason.
Can they write that? I'm really awesome. I'm just not pushy. Sorry. Please use me. Yeah, I don't know how that works.
Or maybe it could be that maybe they're not signed up with the referral programs, or they're not doing some of those other lead generation, but they're doing sphere marketing. They're doing geographic farming. They're doing those things. But maybe it's just a slower time, but they really take great care of those people that they're working with. And again, that goes back to those intangible things of, are you meeting your client where they are? And are you taking care of what they need? Maybe you had clients who did have like longer transaction times for whatever reason. Maybe they were trying to time a purchase and a sale because they didn't want to move twice or move in with their parents or do something like that. Like, maybe they didn't want to have to do that. Doesn't mean they're a bad agent. It just means that maybe they focus more on that individual service.
Because the closely related to that is, if we have these great agents, right, who are awesome at the transaction itself and taking care of the client and meeting the client where they are and so on, but they don't do that many deals, right? And we drive the cost of real estate services lower. Isn't it more likely those people have to leave because they have to do something else to keep a roof over their heads? Whereas the high volume people who are great at the lead gen, right, are able to go out there and make the money, even if commissions down to 1% overall, whatever the number is. But maybe they're not quite as high quality. Like, this is one of the struggles that even I have. Like, I don't know how to square that circle. Like, what's your thoughts, Wendy?
That's a
I'm
hard
probably
question.
like raising questions you hadn't thought about.
No,
This is one of
I
Rob's like
appreciate this,
devil's
right?
advocate type things.
Right.
It's like,
I don't know, like if you think about it, if
mid-level
you
agents being driven out because maybe they do 8 to 10 transactions a year and it's 3%. And if they can't get 3%, they definitely will have to leave the business or do something else. But so that's, I think, where Rob is coming from on this devil's advocacy.
I don't know, if you only sell 6, is it, I don't want to say that you're not motivated, but are some people in that 6 range, like it's their second household income? Like, is it as much of a concern to them? Like if it dips a little, like, I have no idea. I shouldn't assume that, but would it encourage them to do a little more? I'm not sure, but the more we talk about it, I'm thinking I would love to go on an agent profile and see how many lead generation platforms they're signed up for. Like that would be fascinating. Like Sue, whatever, is signed up for none, but here's Mark and he's signed up for like every single referral platform under the sun. So, so he's getting it by paying more so maybe than somebody passing along a name versus her who is only getting it from friends and family that have mentioned her, like that would be interesting. But as a consumer, you'd have to understand what those are. And that's not even clear. So,
Yeah. I mean, I have a friend who's an agent in New Jersey and she's amazing. And I don't think she's ever paid for leads anywhere, but she just gets a ton of business from referrals from her clients. Right. And, her friends, and she's super involved in her community, but she does a ton of business too. But again, she doesn't pay for any of those leads, but she just takes really, really, really good care of her people. And she loves on her community and her community loves on her in return.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So in that vein, I'm going to go back to my regulation question, right? Which is you're obviously paying attention to like what's happening in that world, NAR, DOJ, FTC, all these things. And, like that's been kind of one of my main things along with, a bunch of other things. Like blockchain is my newest one. We'll talk about that offline.
Oh, God. Don't ask me a lot of questions about that.
No, I have a lot of, no, that's why let's talk about offline. Like, the fact that the younger generation is doomed. That's another, pet topic of mine. But there is a part of me that kind of wonders, like, so you're actually starting a company. In other words, you're trying to look for a market-based solution to some of these problems you point out. You've now been doing it for how many years? 2 years, 3 years?
I didn't want to count my first year because I think I just did everything wrong. So as a consumer ally, that really kicked into gear like the beginning of this year, I think. Okay. But the past year, it was discovery, I guess.
But so here's the thing, we're gonna count it because the discovery part's important. I guess what I'm asking is
let's go for 2.
Right. So what I'm asking is, do you think this is something that a market-based solution would solve, like your company or others? There's a bunch of other startups, or is this something where you feel the government has to do something?
I think the thing with startups, and I've seen it so many times, is that they start with the mission for consumers. And the more investments they take, it seems like the more that it's harder for them to hold on to that consumer piece first. I think there's a lot of like the brokerages out there, but I think Rex is the only one that had the guts to be like, nope, we're not paying a buyer agent commission. They're the only ones I know that are bold enough to try that. But I've seen a lot of startups start one way and take money and eventually veer away from it. But, in talking with Rex, the recorded commercials about agents that ignore them. They've never said it directly to me, but I've had a few agents that had someone maybe interested in the home that was posted, but they wanted to talk to them directly. And I said, I don't sell or share information. Like you can send them an inquiry. I don't play middleman. But they won't do it unless they know that they're going to get paid. And I can't blame them for that. But I think that's kind of you look at for sale by owner and you look at how all those are structured. And so when you're not offering a payment and you're getting ignored, that's kind of a problem, and you look at if you separate commissions and everybody pays their own way, like what does that look like? Okay. And I know everyone says the buyers can't afford to pay it, but I mean, as a seller, if you're buying another home, can you afford to pick up the tab for them too? It it goes both ways.
Okay. So this is awesome.
I'm hanging out at my parents' house talking to you guys because of my internet. This is
Right.
it's a great day. It's a great day.
Back full circle to where you're coming back full circle. The audience probably doesn't know you're back full circle because this is where the idea was born, because you were living with your parents between buying a new construction and selling your house that you had previously been in, and you couldn't time them, so you were staying with your parents for a couple months. So I feel like this is
I meant to sit here and talk.
So let me do a quick little lightning round before I close up, because you brought up Rex, by name as a company you think is they're not playing ball. They're willing to stick to their guns, right?
Right.
So let's talk about some of the other big sort of names that are out there. Just kind of give me your take on it from your perspective as someone trying to do greater consumer transparency efforts.
Okay.
Like Zillow.
Oh God. Okay. I'm just putting out there. This is just my opinion.
Correct. Right. That's all it is.
Just my opinion.
Correct. So,
clear.
So we'll just go with how you think they affect transparency, because that seems to be the main thing, right? Zillow.
Right. Okay. It's a marketing lead generation platform, right? I mean, that's the whole intent. It's awesome that they give consumers access, but they're just selling leads to agents. And now that they're their own brokerage, they have to follow the rules as everyone else does, which means all those postings like Rex and for sale by owners are now like shifted to another tab. So things are harder to find. So
Redfin.
I really like, shame on me, I just forgot his name.
Glenn
He's
Kelman?
been very, thank you. Okay, sorry, Glenn. He's been very proactive about the pocket listing issues and stuff like that. So they're one of the commission structured that I think are doing a good job. And I don't know, out of all of them, I think I've heard really good things about consumers using their website for their data and searching for homes on there. So
all right, Open Door.
Okay. I didn't know that they sell all their rejected buyer leads to agents. I didn't know that. Okay. So I think the concept is great. And if you don't want to deal with anything, but I'm just looking at Mike Del Preti. He releases like his recap about them a lot, and they don't seem to be super profitable. And I know that they're backed by a lot of VCs. So, I mean, eventually will that work itself out and they'll become a giant profitable business? Probably, if they can figure it out. But I think it's nice to have that option as a consumer if you don't want to deal with anything. But it comes at a cost. Okay.
Compass.
I'll be honest, I just look at them as another brokerage.
Okay.
As a consumer, they all kind of blend together. I don't.
So can we assume the same goes for like EXP and Realogy, Remax? No? EXP is different? Okay. Talk to me.
Okay, hold on. I will say, on social media, the EXP agents are like pretty intense on like, come to work here, but I think that's because they're structured differently if you have someone underneath you, right? Like you make more money if there's agents under you.
Right.
So that stands out. And as a consumer, you probably wouldn't see it. You just think that's a great place to work, but like they're really strong in their game on like, come to EXP. And I've had a bunch of agents tell me they're constantly calling them to come to EXP. So that's all I know about that is their recruiting.
So who do you think, other than Rex and to some extent Redfin, that is in the real estate space that's really working on transparency besides you guys?
Okay, don't laugh at this.
I won't. Yeah.
It has its issues with fraudulent postings and stuff, but I have always admired Craigslist for creating accessibility and free open market space. Granted, I know it's dated, but they don't sell the data. They don't, it's just a free accessible platform for people. And I know that it's more rentals than for listing your homes, but I think there's an opportunity for them there to expand if they, I know they don't really like to change, which is fine. Craig Newmark, you're still great. And so is Jim Buckmaster. But I do think that they have an opportunity to expand into further transparency. But I don't think there's any brokerage out there that's completely transparent, but that's not their fault. I think it's just individual agents. So you can't really hold them to that.
All right. Well, I think we have the new
I have a
startup.
question though.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh God.
The lightning
Yeah.
round. Sorry.
Okay.
Where do you see the future in the next 5 to 10 years for consumers? Like, because, you know, we've talked a lot about transparency. Rob talked about a lot of the like current players. Do you see other like platforms like Selling Later or other, like, what do you think consumers want based on the research that you've done and the feedback that you're getting? Like, is there space for someone else to come and create something that consumers really want? Or like, what would be your big blue ocean for 5 to 10 years of what the consumer, and I mean, you don't have to have it like
Right.
a 30 point bullet point list or anything, but like, what do consumers want? What do you think they want in the next 5 to 10 years?
I mean, besides, I think transparency if you look at commissions, they've gone down less than 1% since I was 10 years old and I'm 39. So I think that's questionable, right? Like, why is this still so expensive? And I think there has to be some sort of explanation or something to that. But I really like Home Openly because they don't sell information and agents can put what they're willing to negotiate. So you have like Clever that forces agents to do what 1%, right? Is that the structure? But when that agent's paying their brokerage, like they leave nothing, but Home Openly lets them put what they're comfortable with. So you don't have to have that conversation as a consumer. You can just kind of search. So I like that transparency. Lindy Chapman and I joke about this, and this is probably too far-fetched, but at some point could buying a home be like Carfax? Like, hey, I got an appraisal. This is the amount. I got an inspection. Here's what was wrong. Here's what I'm willing to take off to fix it. Here's my house. Take it or leave it. Here's the number. Because everything's a surprise. It's a surprise when it hits the market. It's a surprise when the appraisal comes in. It's a surprise when the home inspection comes in, and everything stops and changes. And it's like, well, what if you just did all that backwards, which is maybe too far out there. And, but it's something I've always thought about. Like, what if it was more transparency and like what the home was? And the biggest one is what Customer Commons is building, which is kind of like a workaround to the big search engines, because like my tiny little startup can't compete with the clicks with Zillow. Like I will never be able to compete with SEO for them. And this kind of is like a byway to, like, if Google and Zillow are all on the highway, like this is a workaround where consumers can connect directly. And that would be a big game changer, because it's essentially what Selling Later does, but on a one-to-one, no middleman connection whatsoever. So when that comes to fruition, I think that's going to be a big dynamic and a big change for everything.
Interesting. It seems to me you should be having conversations with eBay, but we can talk about that offline as well. You know,
or auctions.com or something.
Yeah. All right. We've already spent like an hour, and with the video, it's a lot longer. Wendy, I just want to say thank you so much. I'm fascinated by what you're up to.
Did this.
Yeah, I mean, look, I understand that there's going to be people that are watching this, because let's face it, I'm in the industry, and a lot of them are going to just hate on you. I think what I would just say about that is don't hate, right? It's not about hate. I think what you're up to, what Selling Later is trying to get to, is just greater transparency, right?
Right.
And it's not about whether you like or hate or defend your business model or not. It's just, look, transparency is going to happen one way or another, whether it's through market forces because we volunteer say it's better for us to be more transparent, or it's going to be forced on us through government regulation. It's going to happen, right? So it's like, let's not hate on individuals or companies for trying to do stuff. Let's just think about the concept of transparency and kind of Sunny's question as to what is it that the consumer is going to demand 5 to 10 years out. Because whatever it is they demand is going to be the reality, whether we like it or not. You just have to kind of get ready for that. So I think that's how I think about it. And I would encourage people to reach out to you to have these conversations and be a little bit challenged. So from that perspective, where can people find you, Wendy?
I want to say LinkedIn, but boy, has that gotten spammy. Good Lord. It's every day. My inbox is just solicitations, but I'm active on LinkedIn. Don't look for me on TikTok. It's embarrassing when I post there. Don't do it. Just don't do it. I guess LinkedIn, like we have an IFUNDWomen account to like contribute to our cause for transparency. But I guess LinkedIn, you can send my email out. I don't care. I'm happy.
What is your email? So tell people.
Yeah. Oh God. Okay. It's WGILCH@sellinglater.com. I'm going to regret that, aren't I? I'm totally going to regret that.
And people should really check out the Selling Later site too, because you do have a lot of great information on there, and you're not taking a dump on the industry or anything. You're saying, hey, by the way, consumers want to know these things. These are some things that they should know. These are some conversations that they should be empowered to have.
Right.
And great agents are open to those conversations.
Right.
That they are open to those conversations. They are open to those questions. Great agents are not going to shy away from those conversations. And so you're just empowering consumers with, hey, you know what? Maybe ask about these things. Go in, do your homework ahead of time, ask these questions, and your agent should be really happy that you are doing your due diligence and wanting to make sure that they're finding the best person to work with. I mean, all of the great agents that I know, and I know a lot, they are happy to have those conversations, even if they're hard.
Right. Yeah. Not everything's going to be easy. I always like to say I'm not anti-agent. I'm anti-bad agent. But it is interesting when I'll share consumer stories, some agents will reply on social and say, you don't need to make our industry look worse. And I think, well, don't be mad at me. Like, take that anger and put it towards the people committing these issues. Like, I mean, I screenshot stuff all day long, so I'll just like keep rolling it out there. But it's not about don't do this, don't do that, don't use this person. It's just like, here's what I didn't know. I think you should know to help you get prepared and and hopefully have a really great, honest, transparent experience, however you decide to go.
Yeah. All right. So it's Wendy Gilch, Gilch on LinkedIn, and sellinglater.com. It's exactly what it sounds like, sellinglater.com.
I'm just basic. I'm a basic company name. I'm okay with that.
All right. Well, Wendy, thank you so much for joining us. This was awesome. Okay.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you.